I was reaching for napkins when my fingers brushed against cold metal. The handcuffs were heavier than I expected, real chrome, with a keyhole that caught the afternoon light. And beneath them, folded small like someone hoped it would disappear, was a hotel receipt with my husband's name on it. A date I remembered, a time he said he was working late. Let me start from the beginning, because nothing about that moment makes sense without understanding what came before it. Before I begin, if you believe women's stories deserve to be heard, please like this video and subscribe. It tells me I'm not alone in this, and that means everything. My name is Rachel, and I'm 38 years old. I've been married to Marcus for 11 years, together for 13. We have 2 kids, Emma, who's 9, and Tyler, who's 7. On paper, we were the kind of family people envied. Nice house in a good school district, 2 cars, family vacations every summer. Marcus worked in pharmaceutical sales, which meant a lot of travel but also a comfortable income. I'd been a high school English teacher before Emma was born, but I'd taken a few years off when the kids were small. Now I was back part-time, teaching 3 classes a day, which gave me flexibility for pickup and drop-off. It worked for us, or so I thought. Our marriage was solid, or at least that's what I told myself. Marcus was a good father when he was home. He showed up to soccer games and school concerts. He helped with homework and bedtime routines. But over the past year, I'd started to notice small changes. Nothing dramatic, just a gradual shift in his attention. He'd started going to the gym more often, leaving early in the morning before the kids woke up. He'd bought new clothes, updated his wardrobe with things I'd never seen him wear. Fitted shirts, designer jeans, cologne that smelled different from his usual scent. When I'd commented on it, he'd shrugged and said he was trying to take better care of himself. I'd encouraged it. Honestly, I had. We'd both let ourselves go a bit after the kids were born, and I was happy to see him taking interest in his health again. I didn't think to question it further. His work trips became more frequent too, 3 or 4 times a month instead of the usual 1 or 2. Always medical conferences, sales meetings, client dinners that ran late. He'd come home exhausted, kiss me absently on the forehead, and fall asleep facing away from me. Our intimacy had faded, not disappeared exactly, but become routine, scheduled, something we did on Saturday nights if we weren't too tired. I'd mentioned it once, suggested we try to reconnect, maybe get away for a weekend without the kids. He'd agreed enthusiastically, but the weekend never materialized. Something always came up, a work emergency, a kids' event we couldn't miss. I threw myself into other things, my teaching, the kids' activities, volunteering at their school. I made plans with friends, joined a book club, started running in the mornings. I built a life that felt full enough that I didn't notice how little Marcus was actually in it. My best friend Sarah had noticed, though. We'd been friends since college, and she knew me better than almost anyone. One afternoon over coffee, she'd asked me, point blank, if everything was okay with Marcus. Of course, I'd said automatically. Why would you ask? She'd hesitated, stirring her coffee slowly. I don't know, she'd said carefully. You just seem lonely lately, even when you talk about him. I'd brushed it off, made some joke about marriage after kids, how everyone goes through phases. But her words had stuck with me. Lonely. Was I lonely? I'd tried to push the thought away, but it kept surfacing at odd moments. In the car on my way to work, standing in the shower, lying awake at night while Marcus slept beside me. Then came that Tuesday afternoon in late October. Emma had a dentist appointment after school, and I'd picked her up early. We were running late because she'd forgotten her library book and we'd had to go back for it. In the car, she'd spilled her juice box all over her lap and started crying about her favorite shirt being ruined. It's okay, sweetie, I'd said, trying to soothe her. We'll get it cleaned up. Let me just find some napkins. I'd pulled over into a parking lot and reached across to the glove box. We always kept napkins there for emergencies like this. I'd opened it without thinking, already reaching inside, my mind on getting Emma cleaned up and to the dentist on time. And that's when I felt them, the handcuffs. At first, I didn't understand what I was touching. The metal was cold and smooth, heavier than I expected. I pulled them out slowly, staring at them in confusion. Real handcuffs, chrome-plated, with a working lock and key mechanism. "Mommy, what are those?" Emma asked from the back seat, her juice-stained shirt temporarily forgotten. "Nothing, honey," I said automatically, my voice steadier than I felt. "Just something Daddy must have found." But even as I said it, I knew it didn't make sense. Why would Marcus have handcuffs in our family car? My first thought was that maybe they were a gag gift, something from a bachelor party or a work prank. Marcus's colleague Brad had gotten married a few months ago. Maybe this was left over from that. I turned them over in my hands, looking for any indication of where they came from. They didn't look like toy handcuffs. They were real, professional grade, the kind police officers used. Or the kind you could buy at specialty stores for other purposes. I set them on the passenger seat and reached back into the glove box for the napkins. That's when I saw the receipt. It was folded, small, and wedged into the corner, like someone had tried to hide it but hadn't been quite careful enough. I pulled it out and unfolded it with trembling fingers. It was from a hotel, the Riverside Inn, about 20 miles from our house. Not a chain hotel, but one of those boutique places with expensive rooms and privacy. The date on the receipt was from 3 weeks ago, a Thursday. I remembered that Thursday. Marcus had texted me that afternoon saying he had a late client dinner, that he wouldn't be home until after the kids were in bed. He'd gotten home around 11, smelling like wine and claiming he was exhausted. The receipt showed a room charge, $240, and it was posted at 7:30 in the evening, a time when he'd told me he was at dinner with clients. "Mommy?" Emma's voice broke through my thoughts. "Are you okay?" I looked at her in the rearview mirror, her face worried, her shirt still damp with juice. "I'm fine, sweetie," I said, forcing a smile. "Let's get you cleaned up." I wiped her down with the napkins, my hands moving automatically while my mind raced. There had to be an explanation. Maybe the receipt was old, from before we were married. Maybe it had been in the car for years and I'd just never noticed it. But the date was right there, printed clearly, 3 weeks ago. And the handcuffs were new, shiny, barely used. I folded the receipt and put it in my purse along with the handcuffs. I'd ask Marcus about them later, I decided. There was probably a perfectly reasonable explanation. There had to be. We made it to the dentist with 5 minutes to spare. I sat in the waiting room while Emma got her cleaning, scrolling mindlessly through my phone. But I couldn't focus on anything. My mind kept returning to the handcuffs, to the receipt, to Marcus coming home late that Thursday smelling like wine. I pulled out the receipt again and looked at it more carefully. It listed a room number, 312, and a checkout time of 9:45 p.m., just enough time to drive home and arrive when he did. I opened my calendar and checked that Thursday. I'd been home with the kids all evening. Tyler had a science project due, and I'd spent 2 hours helping him build a model volcano. Emma had practiced piano. I'd made dinner, given them both baths, read bedtime stories. A normal Thursday evening, except my husband hadn't been at a client dinner. He'd been at a hotel, with handcuffs. The receptionist called Emma's name and I stood up, mechanically. The dentist said everything looked great. No cavities, see you in 6 months. I nodded and smiled and scheduled the next appointment. All while the receipt burned a hole in my purse. When we got back to the car, Emma was chattering happily about the sticker the hygienist had given her. I drove home on autopilot, my hands steady on the wheel, my mind spinning with questions I didn't want to ask. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe there was a simple explanation. But deep down, in a place I didn't want to acknowledge, I already knew the truth. I just wasn't ready to face it yet. That night, when Marcus came home, I said nothing. I served dinner, helped with homework, tucked the kids into bed. And when he kissed me goodnight and rolled over to sleep, I lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, wondering who my husband really was. I didn't ask Marcus about the handcuffs that night, or the next night. I told myself I was waiting for the right moment, but the truth was I was terrified of what his answer might be. So I watched instead, started paying attention to details I'd been too busy or too trusting to notice before. The next morning, I watched him get ready for work. He spent longer than usual on his hair, checking his reflection from multiple angles. The cologne he applied wasn't the one I'd bought him last Christmas. When his phone buzzed with a text, he read it quickly and smiled before deleting it. "Who was that?" I asked casually, pouring his coffee. "Just Brad," he said without looking up, "wanting to grab lunch today." I nodded, handed him his coffee, kissed him goodbye. And then I did something I'd never done before. I checked the phone bill. We had a family plan, and I had access to all the details online. I sat at my laptop after dropping the kids at school, my hands shaking slightly as I logged in. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I wouldn't find anything, that this was a violation of his privacy. But I looked anyway. The call log showed dozens of calls to a number I didn't recognize. Short calls, mostly, 5 or 10 minutes, but frequent. Multiple times a day, often late at night after I'd gone to bed. And text messages, hundreds of them over the past 3 months. I wrote down the number on a piece of paper, my hand trembling. Then I cleared my browser history and closed the laptop, suddenly afraid Marcus would somehow know I'd been looking. I needed to know who that number belonged to, but I was scared to call it directly. Instead, I did a reverse phone lookup online. The results came back with a name, Alyssa Chen, and a LinkedIn profile showing she worked at Marcus's company in marketing. I stared at her profile photo for a long time. She was young, maybe 28 or 29, pretty, with long dark hair and a confident smile. Her profile said she'd joined the company 8 months ago. 8 months, right around the time Marcus started going to the gym more, right around the time his wardrobe changed, right around the time he started traveling more frequently. I felt sick. But I still didn't have proof of anything, I told myself. Maybe they were just colleagues. Maybe they worked together on projects. Maybe all those phone calls were perfectly innocent. I needed more information. I went through Marcus's credit card statements next, all the ones I had access to. Our joint account showed the usual expenses, groceries and gas and kids' activities. But Marcus had his own credit card too, one he used for work expenses. I'd never thought to look at it before. It took me an hour to find the login information, buried in a file on our shared computer. When I finally got in, I had to sit down. The charges told a story I didn't want to read. Restaurants I'd never heard of, expensive ones, the kind with prix-fixe menus and wine lists, flower deliveries from a boutique shop downtown, hotel charges, not just the Riverside Inn but others too, small amounts from lingerie stores and jewelry shops, rides from car services instead of his usual cab company. And all of it in the past 6 months, thousands of dollars. Money I'd assumed was work expenses, would be reimbursed, was part of his job. I printed out the statements and hid them in my desk drawer at school. I couldn't keep them at home where Marcus might find them. I felt like I was building a case, gathering evidence, preparing for something I couldn't quite name yet. That weekend, Marcus said he had to go into the office on Saturday. "Big presentation on Monday," he explained, kissing my forehead. "I'll be home by dinner." "Okay," I said. "I'll take the kids to the park." But I didn't take them to the park. Instead, I called my sister and asked if she could watch them for a few hours. "I need to run some errands," I told her, hating how easily the lie came. Then I followed him. I'd never done anything like this before, never imagined I would need to, but I borrowed my sister's car so he wouldn't recognize mine, and I waited down the street from our house until he left. He didn't go to his office. He drove to an apartment complex on the north side of town, one of those new buildings with a gym and a rooftop terrace. I watched him park and walk to the entrance, where someone was waiting for him. Alyssa. I recognized her from her LinkedIn photo. She was wearing yoga pants and a fitted tank top, her hair in a ponytail. When Marcus reached her, she smiled and stood on her toes to kiss him. Not a quick peck, but a real kiss, the kind that spoke of familiarity and comfort. I watched them disappear into the building together, hand in hand. Then I sat in my sister's car for 20 minutes, unable to move, unable to think, just breathing and trying not to cry. This was real. This wasn't my imagination or paranoia. My husband was having an affair. For months, while I'd been teaching classes and packing lunches and helping with homework, he'd been building another life with someone else. I drove to Sarah's house. She took one look at my face and pulled me inside. I told her everything: the handcuffs, the receipt, the phone calls, the credit card statements, what I'd just seen. She listened without interrupting, her hand holding mine. "What are you going to do?" she asked when I finally stopped talking. "I don't know," I admitted. I feel like my whole life just collapsed, like everything I thought was real was actually a lie. Sarah hugged me while I cried. Not dramatic sobs, just quiet tears for the marriage I'd thought I had, for the man I'd thought I knew, for the family I'd been so proud of that was actually built on secrets and lies. "You need a lawyer," Sarah said finally, "before you confront him. You need to protect yourself and the kids." I nodded, knowing she was right, but not wanting to face it yet. A lawyer meant divorce, meant admitting my marriage was over, meant blowing up my kids' lives. But what was the alternative? Pretending I didn't know? Going back to being the wife who didn't ask questions? I picked up the kids from my sister's house and went home. Marcus came home at 6, just like he'd promised, with takeout for dinner. He was in a good mood, playful with the kids, affectionate with me, like he hadn't just spent the afternoon with another woman. I played along, ate the food he brought, laughed at his jokes, tucked the kids in together like we did every night. And when we were alone, when he reached for me in bed, I let him. Because I didn't know what else to do. Because I was still processing. Because part of me was hoping I was wrong about all of it. But lying there afterward, listening to him sleep, I knew I wasn't wrong. And I knew I couldn't keep pretending. I just needed to figure out my next move. Needed to protect my children and myself before everything fell apart. The following Monday, while Marcus was at his real office and the kids who were at school, I met with a lawyer. Her name was Patricia Simmons, and Sarah had recommended her after asking around discreetly. Patricia specialized in divorce cases, particularly ones involving hidden assets and infidelity. Her office was in a historic building downtown with dark wood paneling and leather chairs. I felt out of place there, like I'd stumbled into someone else's life. This couldn't really be happening to me. I was a high school English teacher with 2 kids and a minivan. I didn't need a divorce lawyer. But I did, and Patricia made that very clear in the first 10 minutes of our meeting. "First things first," she said, pulling out a notepad. "Tell me everything. Don't leave anything out, even if it seems small or unimportant." So I did. The handcuffs, the receipt, the phone records, the credit card statements, following him to Alyssa's apartment. Patricia took notes, her face neutral, professional. She'd heard stories like mine before, probably worse. When I finished, she looked up at me with serious eyes. "You've done good preliminary work," she said, "but we need more. We need to document everything, establish a timeline, get copies of all financial records." "Why?" I asked. "I mean, isn't what I already have enough?" Patricia leaned back in her chair. "In a divorce, especially one involving children, every detail matters. If your husband has been spending marital funds on an affair, that's relevant to asset division. If he's been lying about his whereabouts, that speaks to credibility and potentially to custody arrangements." Custody? I hadn't even thought that far ahead. Of course Marcus would want custody, or at least shared custody. The kids loved him. He was their father, even if he'd been a terrible husband. "What do I need to do?" I asked. Patricia handed me a list. "Get copies of everything. Bank statements, credit cards, tax returns, mortgage documents, car titles, insurance policies. Keep documenting his whereabouts. Take screenshots of phone records. And whatever you do, Don't let him know you're doing this. The element of surprise is your biggest advantage right now. I left her office feeling overwhelmed, but also strangely empowered. I had a plan. I had someone on my side who knew how to navigate this. I wasn't just a betrayed wife anymore. I was someone taking action, protecting her future. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a different person. Not dramatically different, not in ways anyone else would notice. But inside, I was constantly calculating, documenting, preparing. I set up a separate email account and started forwarding myself copies of important documents. I opened a bank account at a different institution and started moving small amounts of money there each week. I also started keeping a journal, writing down every detail I could remember. When Marcus said he'd be at the office, I'd note the time he left and returned. When he took phone calls in another room, I'd write down when and for how long. When he came home smelling like perfume that wasn't mine, I documented that too. I felt like a spy in my own life, but I also felt more awake than I had in years. All that time I'd spent being the understanding wife, not asking questions, giving him space, I'd been slowly disappearing. Now I was fighting my way back into visibility. Then came the discovery that changed everything. It was a Wednesday evening, and Marcus had just stepped into the shower. His phone was on the nightstand, charging. I'd stopped looking at it after that first time, scared of what I might find or that he'd somehow know I'd been snooping. But something made me look this time. Maybe intuition, maybe just timing. I picked it up and opened his messages with Alyssa. The most recent one, sent just an hour ago, made my blood run cold. Talked to the realtor today. She thinks we can close by end of month. Can't wait to wake up next to you every morning. I scrolled up, hands shaking. More messages. Discussions about a house they were buying together. A 3-bedroom in a good school district. Plans for how they'd blend his kids with hers. She apparently had a 4-year-old son from a previous relationship. They were planning a life together. Not just an affair, but an actual future. And he'd been moving forward with it without saying a word to me. Without filing for divorce, without having any conversation about ending our marriage. I heard the shower turn off. Quickly, I took photos of the messages, sent them to my secret email, and deleted the evidence. Then I put the phone back exactly where it had been, my heart pounding so hard I thought Marcus would hear it when he came out of the bathroom. But he didn't notice anything. He came out, towel around his waist, and smiled at me. "What do you want to watch tonight?" he asked, like he hadn't just been planning his exit from our marriage. "Whatever you want," I said. My voice sounded normal. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I'd gotten good at pretending everything was fine. That night, after Marcus fell asleep, I sent all the screenshots to Patricia. Her response came the next morning. "This changes things. We need to move quickly. Can you come in today?" I called in sick to work and met Patricia at her office at noon. She'd already reviewed all the screenshots and had her notepad filled with notes. "He's planning to leave you," she said bluntly, "and he's doing it in a way that would leave you vulnerable. If he closes on that house before filing for divorce, that's marital funds being used to purchase property you'd have no claim to. We need to file first. We need to freeze joint assets. We need to move before he does." "How fast?" I asked. "This week," Patricia said. "I can have the papers ready by tomorrow. We'll file on Friday. He'll be served next week. I know this is fast, and I know it's scary. But if we wait, you could lose a lot more than your marriage." I thought about Emma and Tyler, about how their lives were about to change in ways they couldn't possibly understand, about Christmas and birthdays and all the family moments that would never be the same. But I thought about the alternative too, about Marcus leaving on his terms, draining our accounts, moving into his new house with his new family, while I scrambled to figure out how to survive. "Okay," I said, "let's do it." The next 48 hours were the strangest of my life. I went through the motions of being Marcus's wife, all while knowing I was about to blow up our entire existence. I made dinner, helped with homework, laughed at his jokes, slept beside him at night. And every moment felt surreal, like I was watching myself from outside my body. Patricia worked fast. By Thursday afternoon, the divorce papers were ready. She'd filed for divorce citing irreconcilable differences and Marcus's affair. She'd also filed for an emergency order to freeze joint assets, citing his secretive financial behavior and plans to purchase property without my knowledge. "He'll be served on Monday," she told me over the phone. "I'd suggest you not be there when it happens. Take the kids somewhere. Visit your sister, maybe. He's going to be angry, and I don't want you in the line of fire." I agreed. I called my sister Amy and asked if the kids and I could come stay for a few days. "Is everything okay?" she asked carefully. "I'll explain when I see you," I said. I couldn't say it out loud yet, couldn't admit what was happening. Once I said the words, "Marcus and I are getting divorced," it would become real in a way it wasn't yet. That weekend was torture. Marcus was home, relaxed, playing with the kids in the yard, talking about plans for Thanksgiving. He had no idea that in 48 hours his world was going to explode. Part of me felt guilty for ambushing him this way, but a larger part of me remembered all the months he'd been planning his exit, all the lies he'd told, all the trust he'd betrayed. He didn't deserve a warning. He'd made his choices, now I was making mine. On Sunday evening, I packed bags for the kids, telling them we were going to spend a few days at Aunt Amy's. "But what about school?" Emma asked. "You'll go to school from Aunt Amy's house," I said. "It'll be an adventure. And Daddy has to travel this week anyway, so it works out perfectly." The lie came easily. I'd gotten good at lying lately. Or maybe I'd always been good at it and just never had a reason to use that skill. Monday morning, I got the kids ready and loaded them into the car. Marcus was already gone for work, leaving early as usual. I'd kissed him goodbye at the door, knowing it might be the last normal goodbye we'd ever have. He'd smiled and told me he loved me. I'd said it back, and I'd meant it in a way. I loved the man I'd thought he was. I just didn't know who he actually was anymore. Patricia called me at 10 a.m. "He's been served," she said. "The process server found him at his office." "I'm sorry, Rachel. I know this is hard. But you did the right thing." I didn't feel like I'd done the right thing. I felt like I'd detonated a bomb. But I also felt relief. It was done. No more pretending, no more lying, no more living in this weird limbo of knowing and not acting. My phone started ringing 20 minutes later. Marcus. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately, then again. Text messages started flooding in. "What the hell is this? Call me right now. You can't just file for divorce without talking to me first. Where are you? Where are my kids?" I didn't respond. Patricia had told me not to engage, to let everything go through lawyers. It was hard, though. 11 years of marriage, and now we couldn't even talk to each other directly. Amy kept the kids busy while I sat on her couch, phone in hand, watching the messages pile up. Marcus's tone evolved over the course of the day. First anger, then confusion, then bargaining. By evening, the messages had taken on a pleading quality. "Rachel, please, we need to talk about this. I know I've made mistakes, but we can work through this. Think about the kids. Think about our family. Don't throw away 11 years like this." The hypocrisy of it would have been funny if it weren't so painful. He'd been ready to throw away 11 years. He'd been planning a new life with someone else. But now that I'd taken control, now that I'd made the first move, suddenly he wanted to fight for us. I showed the messages to Patricia. "Typical," she said. "He's going to try to make you feel guilty, like you're the one destroying the family. Don't engage. Let him send his messages. They'll actually help us in court, showing he's trying to manipulate you." Over the next week, I stayed at Amy's house with the kids. I told them Daddy and I needed some space to work through some grown-up problems. Emma was old enough to sense something serious was happening. Tyler, at 7, was just happy to have extended time with his cousins. Marcus's messages continued, some angry, accusing me of turning his kids against him. Some desperate, begging me to reconsider. Some tried to be reasonable, suggesting mediation, couples therapy, anything but divorce. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I focused on the practical things. I met with Patricia to go over strategy. I talked to the kids' school counselor about how to support them through this transition. I started looking at apartments I could afford on my teaching salary. I made lists of everything that needed to happen, breaking down the overwhelming into manageable pieces. Amy was incredible during this time. She never once asked me if I was sure, never suggested I should try to work it out. She'd seen enough, heard enough about Marcus's behavior over the years to know this was inevitable. She just supported me, took care of my kids when I needed to cry or meet with lawyers, kept telling me I was stronger than I thought. Sarah came over most evenings after the kids were in bed. We'd sit on Amy's back porch with tea, and she'd let me talk through everything. All the memories that kept surfacing, good and bad, all the questions I couldn't answer, all the fear about what came next. How did I not see it? I asked her one night. How was I so blind? Sarah was quiet for a moment. You weren't blind, she said finally. You trusted him. That's not the same thing as being blind. You trusted him because you'd given him 11 years of trust, and he'd never given you reason not to. He's the one who betrayed that trust, Rachel, not you. Her words helped, but guilt still gnawed at me. Should I have paid more attention, asked more questions, pushed harder when things felt off? But I also knew that kind of thinking was pointless. I couldn't change the past. I could only move forward. Patricia called me on Thursday with an update. Marcus's lawyer reached out, she said. He wants to negotiate. He's willing to agree to a fair division of assets if you'll consider shared custody. What does fair division mean to him? I asked. 50-50 split of everything, Patricia said, which honestly isn't terrible considering, though I'd argue that the money he spent on his affair should come out of his share, not the joint assets. And I want documentation of every penny he's hidden. And custody? That's where it gets complicated, Patricia admitted. He wants 50-50 there, too. 1 week with you, 1 week with him. The problem is, he has a good job, no history of abuse or neglect. Unless we can prove the affair affected his parenting, which is hard to do, a judge might grant joint custody anyway. I thought about Emma and Tyler, passed back and forth like packages. About them having 2 houses, 2 bedrooms, 2 sets of rules. About eventually meeting Alyssa and her son, becoming part of Marcus's new blended family. The thought made me sick, but I also knew I couldn't keep them from their father out of spite. Let's counter, I told Patricia. 60-40 split of assets, with me getting the house. And I want primary custody, with him having every other weekend and 1 dinner a week. He can have more time during summer and holidays, but the kids need stability. They need 1 primary home. I'll make the offer, Patricia said, but be prepared for him to fight it. He's not going to want to look like the bad guy here, and accepting less than 50-50 custody does that. She was right. Marcus's lawyer came back with a firm no. He wanted equal time with his children, equal split of everything. He was even demanding I pay half of his legal fees since I was the one who'd filed. He's being ridiculous, I told Patricia. He spent thousands of dollars on his affair. He was planning to buy a house without telling me, and now he wants me to pay his legal fees? It's a negotiating tactic, Patricia explained. He's asking for everything, so that when we compromise, he gets most of what he actually wants. Don't worry, we're going to counter again and we'll end up somewhere reasonable. This is going to take time, Rachel. Divorce isn't quick, especially when both parties are digging in. Time. I had plenty of that, even if I didn't want it. Time to sit in this uncomfortable middle space between married and divorced. Time to watch my kids adjust to a reality they didn't ask for. Time to figure out who I was without Marcus. 2 weeks after filing, I finally agreed to let Marcus see the kids. Patricia had advised me to allow supervised visits to show I wasn't trying to alienate them from their father. We met at a park, neutral ground, with Amy there as a buffer. I saw him before he saw us. He looked terrible. He'd lost weight, his clothes hung loose on him, dark circles under his eyes, hair uncombed. He looked like someone who hadn't slept in 2 weeks. When Emma and Tyler spotted him, they ran to him, and he swept them both up in his arms. I watched him hold them, his eyes closed, and for a moment, I felt sorry for him. Whatever else was true, he did love his children. That was real. "Hi," he said when he finally looked at me. "Hi," I replied. We stood there awkwardly while the kids ran toward the playground. Amy moved away to give us space, but stayed close enough to intervene if needed. "Rachel, he started, then stopped. "Can we talk? Really talk?" "Our lawyers are talking," I said. "That's how this works now." "That's not what I mean," he said, his voice rising slightly. "I mean us, you and me. We've been married for 11 years. Don't I at least deserve a conversation?" I looked at him, this man I'd built a life with. "You had a conversation with Alyssa about buying a house together," I said quietly. "You had conversations with her every day for months. You had plenty of conversations, just not with me." His face went pale. "How did you—" "It doesn't matter how I know," I interrupted. "I know. I know about the hotel rooms, the dinners, the gifts. I know about the house. I know everything, Marcus." He looked away, watching the kids on the playground. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," he said finally. "How was it supposed to happen?" I asked. "Were you going to tell me before or after you moved into your new house?" He didn't answer. We stood in silence for a moment. Finally, he said, "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean much now, but I am. I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did," I said. "You made a choice. Actually, you made hundreds of choices, every day for months, and now we both have to live with the consequences." I left him at the park with the kids and Amy, driving away before I could change my mind or say something I'd regret. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, my eyes blurring with tears, but underneath the sadness was something else, a sense of clarity. I'd looked him in the eye and told him I knew everything, and I'd walked away with my dignity intact. That conversation marked a shift. Marcus stopped the desperate messages, stopped trying to contact me directly. Instead, everything went through lawyers, formal and cold, offers and counteroffers, demands and compromises, the slow grinding machinery of divorce. Patricia and I built our case carefully. We documented every expense related to his affair, every hotel room, every dinner, every gift. We showed the pattern of deception, the secret credit cards, the plans to buy property without disclosure. We demonstrated that Marcus had been preparing to leave while still depleting marital assets. We also prepared for the custody fight. I got letters from the kids' teachers, from their pediatrician, from my sister and friends who could testify to my involvement in their daily lives. I kept detailed calendars showing every school event I attended, every doctor's appointment I handled, every night I was the one putting them to bed. It wasn't about proving Marcus was a bad father. It was about showing I was their primary caregiver, the stable center of their lives, the one who should continue to provide that stability. A month after filing, we were getting close to a settlement. Marcus had agreed to give me the house and 60% of the liquid assets. I'd agreed to let him have his retirement accounts untouched and to take on slightly more of the shared debt. The custody arrangement was still being negotiated, but we'd moved from his demand for 50-50 to a proposal of 60-40 in my favor. It wasn't perfect, but it was livable, and I was tired of fighting, tired of thinking about this every day. I just wanted to move forward, to start building a new life for myself and my kids. "I think we should accept the custody proposal," I told Patricia. "It's not ideal, but it's fair, and I don't want to drag this out any longer than necessary." Patricia nodded. "I think that's wise," she said. "You've protected yourself and your children. That's what matters. Everything else is just details." The final hearing was scheduled for a cold morning in early December, 6 weeks after I'd found those handcuffs in the glove box. 6 weeks that felt like 6 years. Patricia had prepared me for what to expect, the questions the judge might ask, how to conduct myself in court. "Stay calm," she'd reminded me the night before. "Answer questions directly, but don't volunteer extra information. And remember, this is almost over. By this time tomorrow, you'll be officially divorced." I'd barely slept. I kept thinking about all the moments that had led to this. The wedding 11 years ago, full of hope and promise. The births of Emma and Tyler. The houses we'd lived in. The vacations we'd taken. All the ordinary days that had made up our life together. and I thought about the handcuffs, that small, cold piece of metal that had unraveled everything. If Emma hadn't spilled her juice box, if I'd had napkins in my purse instead of reaching for the glove box, would I still be living in ignorance? Would Marcus have left one day without warning, the way he'd planned? I got dressed carefully that morning, choosing clothes that felt professional but also like myself. A navy dress, simple jewelry, low heels. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. 6 weeks ago, I'd been a wife and mother who taught English at the local high school. Now, I was a soon-to-be divorced single mother fighting for her future. Amy drove me to the courthouse. She squeezed my hand before I got out of the car. "You've got this," she said firmly. "You're the strongest person I know, even if you don't feel like it right now." The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Just a judge's bench, a few tables, some chairs for observers. Marcus was already there with his lawyer, sitting on the opposite side of the room. He looked better than he had at the park, more put together, but there was a hardness to his expression that I didn't recognize. Patricia guided me to our table and went over the plan one more time. "The judge has reviewed all the documents," she whispered. "She just needs to confirm a few details and make sure you both understand the terms. Then she'll sign the decree and it's done." The judge entered and we all stood. She was a woman in her 60s with gray hair and glasses that made her look like a librarian. She settled into her chair and opened the file in front of her, reading for what felt like forever. Finally, she looked up. "This is the matter of Thornton versus Thornton," she said. "I've reviewed all the submitted documents and I'm prepared to rule on the dissolution of marriage and the custody agreement." She looked at Marcus first. "Mr. Thornton, I've read the allegations regarding your extramarital affair and the financial decisions you made during that time. Do you contest any of the facts as presented?" Marcus's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client acknowledges that mistakes were made in the marriage," he said carefully. "However, he disputes that his personal choices should impact the financial settlement or custody arrangement. He's a devoted father who wants equal time with his children." The judge frowned. "Mistakes were made," she repeated slowly. "That's an interesting way to describe what I see in these documents. Deliberate deception regarding finances, use of marital assets for personal relationships, plans to purchase property without spousal notification." She turned to me. "Mrs. Thornton, do you agree with the settlement terms as negotiated?" I stood, my legs steadier than I expected. "Yes, Your Honor," I said. "I believe the terms are fair and in the best interests of my children." The judge nodded. "I'm going to approve this settlement with one modification," she said. "Mr. Thornton, I'm awarding primary custody to Mrs. Thornton with a 60-40 split as proposed. However, I'm also ordering that you complete a co-parenting course before the custody arrangement begins. And I'm putting language in the decree that any additional violations of the existing order, particularly around financial disclosure, will result in reassessment of custody." Marcus's face went red. His lawyer started to object, but the judge held up her hand. "I've seen enough cases like this to know the pattern," she said. "A spouse who deceives about finances will often deceive about other things. Mrs. Thornton has been the primary caregiver, and I see no reason to disrupt that stability for the children. You'll have ample time with them, Mr. Thornton. Use it wisely." She signed the papers with a flourish. "The marriage of Marcus and Rachel Thornton is hereby dissolved," she declared. "The settlement terms as modified are now legally binding. I wish you both the best moving forward." And just like that, it was over. 11 years of marriage ended with a signature and a gavel. I stood there for a moment, not quite believing it was real. Patricia was gathering papers, talking about next steps, but I couldn't focus on her words. I glanced at Marcus. He was staring at the table, his jaw clenched. His lawyer was talking to him in low tones, probably telling him it could have been worse. And I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no sadness, just emptiness. Patricia touched my arm. "Come on," she said gently. "Let's get you out of here." We walked out of the courtroom into the cold December air. Amy was waiting on the courthouse steps, and she hugged me tight when she saw me. "It's done," I said into her shoulder. "I'm officially divorced." "How do you feel?" she asked. I thought about it for a moment. How did I feel? Sad, yes. Relieved, definitely. Scared about the future, absolutely. But also something else. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. Free, I said finally. I feel free. It's been 6 months since the divorce was finalized. 6 months of building a new life, one day at a time. The kids adjusted better than I expected. They have their moments, of course. Emma sometimes gets quiet and withdrawn. Tyler occasionally asks if Daddy is coming back home. But mostly, they're okay. Kids are resilient in ways adults forget. They spend every other weekend with Marcus and one evening a week for dinner. He completed the co-parenting course the judge ordered, and to his credit, he's been consistent with the schedule. He's even been appropriate about Alyssa, not introducing her to the kids until several months after the divorce, doing it slowly and carefully. I hate that my children are meeting her, but I also know I can't control that part of Marcus's life anymore. The house felt too big at first, full of memories I didn't know what to do with. But slowly I made it mine. I repainted the bedroom, got rid of furniture that felt like it belonged to our old life. I turned Marcus's home office into a reading nook, filled it with books and a comfortable chair and good light. The kids and I spend time there together now, reading side by side, each lost in our own stories. I went back to work full-time, teaching 5 classes instead of 3. The extra money helps, and honestly, I need the structure. My students are preparing for finals now, writing essays about the books we've read this semester. I grade their papers at night after the kids are in bed, and it feels good to focus on something concrete, something with clear answers. Sarah and I still meet for coffee every week. She's been my rock through all of this, listening without judgment, reminding me of who I am when I forget. "You're doing amazing," she told me last week. "Seriously, Rachel, I don't know if I could have handled all this with as much grace as you have." I laughed at that. "Grace?" I said. "I've cried more in the past 6 months than in the previous 10 years combined." "Exactly," Sarah said. "You've let yourself feel it. That takes courage. A lot of people would have just shut down or gotten bitter. You did neither." Maybe she's right. I don't feel bitter, even though I probably have the right to be. I feel sad sometimes, mourning what I thought my life would be. But I also feel grateful. Grateful that I found out when I did. Grateful that I had people around me who helped me through it. Grateful that my kids and I are okay. I think about those handcuffs sometimes, still sitting in a box in my closet, along with the hotel receipt and all the other evidence I gathered. I kept them, not because I want to revisit the pain, but as a reminder. A reminder that sometimes the smallest things reveal the biggest truths, that paying attention to your instincts matters, that asking questions when something feels wrong isn't being paranoid, it's being smart. Emma asked me last week if I was sad about the divorce. We were making dinner together, just the 2 of us. Tyler was at Marcus's for his weekly dinner. She'd been quiet all afternoon, and I could tell something was on her mind. "Sometimes," I told her honestly, "I'm sad that our family isn't together anymore. But I'm not sad about the divorce itself. Does that make sense?" She thought about it while stirring the pasta sauce. "I think so," she said finally. "Like, you're sad about what happened, but not about what you did?" "Exactly," I said. "Sometimes we have to make hard choices, even when they make us sad. But that doesn't mean they're wrong choices." She nodded, and we finished making dinner in comfortable silence. Later, after Tyler came home and we'd all eaten together, I tucked them both into bed and stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to their breathing. My kids. My house. My life. It looked nothing like what I'd planned, but it was mine, and it was enough. People ask me sometimes if I'm dating again. The answer is no, not yet. Maybe someday, but right now I'm focused on rebuilding, on figuring out who I am outside of being someone's wife, on being a good mother and a good teacher and a good friend, on learning to be comfortable alone. I've learned things through this family drama that I couldn't have learned any other way. I've learned that I'm stronger than I thought, that I can handle hard things, survive betrayal, start over. I've learned that marriage isn't a guarantee of honesty, that love doesn't automatically mean loyalty, that you can spend years with someone and still not really know them. But I've also learned that there are people in your life who will show up for you when everything falls apart, that asking for help isn't weakness, that starting over isn't failure. And I've learned to pay attention, to listen to that voice inside that says something isn't right, to ask questions even when the answers might be hard to hear, to trust myself, my perceptions, my gut feelings. This real-life story, this emotional story of betrayal and survival, taught me that the end of one thing can be the beginning of something else, that sometimes what feels like everything falling apart is actually everything falling into place, that you can lose the life you thought you wanted and find something better on the other side. I still drive that car, the one where I found the handcuffs. Sometimes when I'm at a red light, I glance at the glove box and think about that moment, the moment everything changed, the moment I stopped pretending not to see. And I'm grateful for it, strange as that sounds. Grateful for the pain that woke me up. Grateful for the crisis that forced me to choose myself. So if you're reading this, if any part of this story resonates with you, I want you to know something. Pay attention to the small things that don't add up. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Don't make excuses for behavior that hurts you. And know that if your worst fears are confirmed, if your life falls apart the way you were afraid it would, you will survive it. You'll be sad and scared and angry, but you'll also discover strength you didn't know you had. The handcuffs in my glove box changed everything, but they also saved me from years of lies I would have kept believing. Sometimes the worst discoveries lead to the best transformations. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find yourself. I'm still finding myself, honestly, still figuring out what comes next. But I'm doing it on my own terms now, with my eyes open and my voice strong. And that's something Marcus's betrayal could never take away from me. My dignity, my strength, my ability to choose myself, those were always mine. I just had to remember how to use them. If this real-life story touched you, or if you've experienced something similar in your own life, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Your story matters. Your experience matters. And if you want more calm, reflective stories about finding strength in difficult times, about surviving betrayal and building new lives, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, the hardest moments often lead to the strongest versions of ourselves. You're not alone.